A forest ranger finds a dying puppy in a blizzard and brings it home to save its life. But within 24 hours, the creature begins to transform into something impossible, something that shouldn't exist. And when a massive pack emerges from the darkness, all searching for the same thing, Tom Sullivan realizes he's made a choice that could either save an entire species or destroy his town. This is the story of a rescue that became a revelation, a story about a man who saved something he didn't understand, only to discover that understanding came far too late. Because sometimes, when you pull something from the cold and bring it into the warmth, you don't just rescue it. The forest was dying. Tom Sullivan could feel it in his bones as he trudged through the first snowfall of the season, his ranger boots crunching against frozen pine needles that should have still been green. In 17 years of patrolling these mountains, he'd never known the woods to fall silent like this. No owl calls, no rustle of deer moving through underbrush, just the whisper of snow falling through bare branches and his own labored breathing echoing back at him. Something was wrong. Tom stopped mid-trail, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness like a knife through black water. The beam caught snowflakes suspended in air, each one a tiny star falling to earth. Beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with the prickling sensation crawling up the back of his neck, the one that 17 years in the wilderness had taught him never to ignore. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost convinced himself it was wind. A whimper, thin and desperate, cutting through the frozen stillness like a child crying in an empty house. Tom's heart clenched. He knew that sound. The cry of something small, something dying. He turned slowly, sweeping his light across the dark woods. The beam found nothing at first, just endless shadows and skeletal trees reaching toward a moonless sky. Then movement, barely visible against the snow-covered ground. A shape, no bigger than his boot, trembling violently near the gnarled roots of an old oak. Tom's breath caught as he moved closer, each step careful, deliberate. When the light finally revealed what lay huddled in the snow, he felt something shift in his chest. It looked like a puppy. Jet-black fur plastered flat by melting snow, paws too large for its fragile body, but it was the eyes that stopped him cold. Enormous eyes, liquid and luminous, reflecting his flashlight with an amber gleam that seemed to glow from within. Those weren't the eyes of any puppy he'd ever seen. The creature lifted its head weakly, too exhausted to run, too cold to do anything but stare. Its tiny body shook so violently that Tom could see the tremors even through its matted fur. Hypothermia, minutes from death, maybe less. Without thinking, Tom dropped to his knees in the snow, stripping off his ranger jacket with hands that suddenly felt clumsy, desperate. He had to move fast, had to get it warm, had to save it before anything. Have you ever rescued an animal that turned out to be something completely different? Drop your story in the comments below. The creature made a sound as he lifted it, and Tom froze. Not a whimper, not a bark, something else entirely. Something that vibrated through his ribs and raised every hair on his arms. A sound that didn't belong to any domestic animal he'd ever encountered. But there was no time to question it. The tiny body was ice cold against his chest as he wrapped his jacket around it, so light it felt like he was holding nothing but bones and failing heartbeat. Tom turned to run back to his truck, boots slipping on ice-covered roots, lungs burning in the frigid air. And that's when he saw them. Tracks in the fresh snow, circling the spot where he'd found the creature. Large tracks, canine but wrong somehow, the spacing too wide, the claw marks too deep. Whatever had made them had been here recently, watching, waiting in the darkness just beyond his flashlight's reach. Tom's pulse hammered as he ran, the creature's shallow breaths warm against his shirt. Someone had abandoned this helpless animal out here to freeze. Someone cruel enough to leave it miles from civilization in a snowstorm with God knows what prowling these woods tonight. But as Tom burst through the tree line toward his truck, one thought whispered at the edges of his mind, refusing to be silenced. Those tracks had been circling, not hunting, not passing through, circling, like something had been looking for what he now carried in his arms, like something would come looking again. He yanked open the truck door, placed the trembling bundle on the passenger seat, and started the engine with shaking hands. As warmth flooded the cab, Tom caught another glimpse of those eyes staring up at him in the dashboard light, wide, intelligent, holding something that looked disturbingly like gratitude or recognition. Tom told himself it was just the cold making him imagine things, just exhaustion and adrenaline playing tricks on his mind. But as he pulled onto the dark mountain road, windshield wipers fighting against the snow, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a choice that would change everything. He'd thought he was saving a lost puppy. He'd thought he was doing the right thing. He'd thought he understood what he was dealing with. He was wrong on all 3 counts, and by the time he discovered the truth, by the time a veterinarian's face would drain of color and hands would shake while delivering an impossible diagnosis, it would be far too late to undo what he'd set in motion. What Tom Sullivan had rescued from that frozen forest wasn't a puppy at all, and what came looking for it would turn his quiet mountain town into ground zero for a revelation that would shock wildlife experts across 3 states. But first, he had to get through the night. First, he had to keep this strange, beautiful, terrifying creature alive long enough to learn what it really was. First, he had to make it home. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Let us know your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Tom's ranger station sat at the edge of Blackwood National Forest, a modest cabin with weathered wood siding and a stone chimney that had seen 40 winters. He'd called this place home for nearly 2 decades, ever since he'd left the city looking for something quieter, something that made sense. The forest had given him that. Purpose, peace, a life built on protecting wild things that couldn't protect themselves. Tonight, that mission felt more urgent than ever. He kicked the door open, still clutching the trembling bundle against his chest, and rushed to the fireplace. His hands shook as he stacked kindling, struck a match, and coaxed flames to life. The orange glow filled the small room, chasing away shadows as heat began to radiate outward. Tom knelt on the hearth rug and carefully unwrapped his jacket. The puppy lay limp in his arms, its breathing shallow and rapid. Its fur, now slightly drier in the warmth, revealed markings he hadn't noticed before. The black coat had faint silver streaks along the back, almost invisible unless the light hit them just right. Its ears were disproportionately large, standing half erect despite its exhaustion. "Come on, little one," Tom whispered, gently rubbing the tiny body with a towel. "Stay with me." The creature's eyes fluttered open, those unnaturally large eyes that seemed to hold more depth than any puppy's should. For a brief moment, they locked onto Tom's face with such intensity that he felt his breath catch. It wasn't the vacant stare of a confused animal. It was focused, studying him, as if measuring whether he could be trusted. Then the moment passed. The puppy let out a weak sound, something between a whine and a chirp, and its head sagged against Tom's hand. He'd worked with enough injured animals to know the signs. severe hypothermia, possible dehydration, maybe even starvation. This wasn't a pet that had wandered off yesterday. This was a creature that had been surviving on its own for days, maybe longer. Tom moved quickly, filling a shallow bowl with lukewarm water and adding a pinch of sugar for energy. He dipped his finger in the liquid and let a few drops fall onto the puppy's tongue. At first, nothing. Then a faint flicker of response as its tongue moved weakly, lapping at the moisture. "That's it," Tom encouraged softly. "Just a little more." Over the next hour, he worked with patient determination. Small sips of water, gentle warmth from the fire. Soft strokes along the puppy's back to stimulate circulation. Slowly, color began returning to its gums. Its breathing steadied. The violent shaking subsided into occasional shivers. Tom pulled an old sleeping bag from his closet and created a makeshift bed near the hearth. He placed the puppy inside, tucking the edges around its small body. For the first time since he'd found it, the creature seemed to relax. Its eyes drifted closed, and a sound emerged from its chest, a low rumbling that might have been a purr if it had come from a cat. But it hadn't come from a cat. It had come from what Tom believed was a puppy, though doubt was beginning to creep into his certainty like frost spreading across glass. He sat back on his heels, studying the sleeping animal in the firelight. The more he looked, the more details seemed off. The shape of its muzzle was slightly too elongated. Its paws, though oversized in the way of all puppies, had claws that seemed unusually thick and curved. And those ears, they were positioned higher on its skull than any dog breed he'd ever encountered. Tom pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo. His service was spotty up here, but he managed to send it to his ex-wife, Sarah, who worked as a vet tech in town. The message was simple. "Found this little guy in the snow. Any idea what breed? Looks weird but half frozen. We'll bring to clinic tomorrow." The reply came faster than expected. Just 3 words. "Tom, be careful." He frowned at the screen. Careful of what? A puppy? Before he could respond, another message appeared. "That's not a normal dog. Keep your distance until I can see it." Tom's stomach tightened. Sarah had 20 years of experience with animals. She didn't spook easily. If she was concerned, there was a reason. He looked back at the sleeping creature. In the warm glow of the fire, it looked innocent, fragile, just a baby that had been abandoned and nearly died. How could something so small be dangerous? But Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. And for the first time since he'd scooped it from the snow, Tom felt a whisper of unease curl around his heart. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The snowstorm was intensifying, cutting the station off from the town below. Even if he wanted to get the puppy to a vet tonight, the roads would be impassable. They were stuck here together until morning at the earliest. Tom grabbed a blanket and settled into his armchair, positioning himself where he could watch both the fire and the sleeping animal. His rifle hung on the wall within arm's reach, a habit from years of living alone in the wilderness. He'd never needed it for anything more threatening than the occasional black bear nosing around his trash. Tonight, though, he found his eyes drifting toward it more than once. The puppy stirred in its sleep, making that strange chirping sound again. Its paws twitched as if it were running through dreams. Tom watched the rise and fall of its small chest, the occasional flick of its oversized ears. "What are you?" he whispered into the quiet room. The only answer was the crackle of burning wood and the howl of wind outside. The forest, usually so full of night sounds, had gone completely silent. Not even the screech owls that normally hunted these woods made a sound. It was as if every creature out there was holding its breath, waiting. Tom pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. Tomorrow, he'd get answers. Tomorrow, he'd drive down to Sarah's clinic and find out exactly what he'd brought into his home. Tonight, exhaustion was beginning to win its battle against adrenaline. His eyes grew heavy, his head nodding forward despite his efforts to stay alert. Pause for a second. What do you think this creature is? Wolf? Fox? Something else entirely? Comment your guess before we continue. Just before he drifted off, he could have sworn he saw the puppy's eyes open briefly, glowing faintly in the darkness like twin embers. But when he blinked and looked again, they were closed, and the creature slept peacefully. Tom told himself it had been a trick of the firelight, just shadows and exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. But deep in his gut, where instinct lived, he knew something was wrong. Knew that tomorrow's trip to the vet would change everything. Knew that the innocent creature sleeping by his fire was hiding a truth that would shake the foundation of everything he thought he understood about the wilderness he'd protected for so many years. Outside, something moved through the trees. Large, careful, leaving no tracks in the fresh snow. It circled the cabin once, twice, then vanished back into the darkness of the forest. And inside, the puppy that wasn't a puppy slept on, dreaming whatever dreams came to creatures caught between two worlds. The first light of dawn crept through the cabin windows, painting everything in shades of gray and silver. Tom woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping upright in the chair. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember why he'd slept there instead of his bed. Then he saw the empty sleeping bag by the fireplace, and his heart lurched. The puppy was gone. No, 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 Tom muttered, lurching to his feet. His eyes swept the small cabin frantically. The front door was still closed and bolted. The windows were shut tight. Where could it have? A sound from the kitchen stopped him cold. A soft scratching, followed by that strange chirping cry. Tom moved slowly around the corner and froze. The puppy sat on top of his refrigerator, 6 feet off the ground, perched on the narrow surface like it was the most natural thing in the world. Its head tilted as it watched him, those enormous eyes reflecting the pale morning light with an amber gleam. "How did you—" Tom's voice trailed off. There was nothing near the refrigerator to climb. No chairs, no shelves, nothing. The puppy would have had to jump straight up, an impossible feat for something so small and weak just hours ago. As if to prove it was no fluke, the creature stood, stretched with feline grace, and leapt down. Not scrambled or fell, but leaped with perfect control, landing soundlessly on the wooden floor. It trotted toward Tom, tail wagging slightly, and sat at his feet, looking up expectantly. Tom's hands trembled as he reached down. The puppy leaned into his touch, making that rumbling, purr-like sound again. Its fur was completely dry now, revealing the full pattern of silver streaks running through the black coat like lightning frozen in midnight. The texture was different, too, coarser and thicker than any dog breed he'd encountered, more like the pelt of something wild. "What are you?" Tom whispered again, but this time the question carried more weight, more fear. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Roads still bad but clearing. Can you make it down by noon? I talked to Dr. Reeves. He wants to see your puppy ASAP." "Tom," he sounded worried when I described it. Tom's stomach nodded. Dr. Marcus Reeves was the best wildlife veterinarian in the region, a man who'd worked with everything from injured eagles to orphaned bear cubs. If he was worried, that meant something. He quickly typed back, "We'll be there. It's acting strange." Climbed onto my fridge overnight. The reply was immediate. "Do not let it bite you. Keep distance until we can examine it. This is serious, Tom." His blood ran cold. He looked down at the puppy, still sitting calmly at his feet, occasionally glancing up at him with what seemed like affection. Or was it something else? Something more calculating? Tom's mind raced through possibilities. Rabies? No, the animal was too coordinated, too aware. Some kind of genetic mutation? A wolf-dog hybrid that someone had illegally bred and then dumped? But that didn't explain the eyes, the movements, the sounds it made. He needed to contain it safely for the drive down the mountain. Tom retrieved a heavy-duty pet carrier from his storage shed, the kind designed for transporting medium-sized dogs. As he brought it inside, the puppy watched with apparent interest, head tilting from side to side. "Come on, little guy," Tom coaxed, opening the carrier door. "We're going to get you some help." The puppy looked at the carrier, then back at Tom. For a long moment, it didn't move. Then, to his surprise, it walked calmly inside and settled down, curling into a tight ball. Almost like it understood what was happening. Almost like it was cooperating. Tom secured the door and carried the carrier to his truck. The puppy made no protest, didn't whine or struggle. It simply watched him through the metal grate, those unnerving eyes never blinking. The drive down the mountain was treacherous. Melting snow had turned the dirt road into a slick ribbon of mud and ice. Tom's truck crawled along, wheels slipping occasionally as he navigated hairpin turns with sheer drops to one side. Under normal circumstances, he'd be white-knuckling the steering wheel, focused entirely on the road. But today, his eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, checking on the carrier in the back seat. The puppy hadn't made a sound since they'd left. It sat perfectly still, watching the forest pass by the windows. And that's when Tom noticed something that made his heart skip. Every time they passed another vehicle going up the mountain, the puppy's ears would swivel toward it, tracking the sound long before Tom himself heard the approaching engine. Its nostrils would flare as if catching scents through the closed carrier, through the truck windows, through impossible distances. Halfway down the mountain, Tom's radio crackled to life. "Sullivan, you copy?" It was Ranger Martinez, working the northern sector. Tom grabbed the handset. "Copy, Martinez. What's up? You seen anything weird in your area? Found tracks this morning that don't make sense. Big tracks, canine maybe, but wrong shape. And whatever made them was circling the cabins near Blackwood Ridge." Tom's blood went cold. Blackwood Ridge was less than 2 miles from his station. "When?" "Best guess? Last night. Tracks are fresh, under the new snow. County Wildlife is sending someone up to investigate. They're thinking maybe a wolf. But Tom, wolves haven't been seen in these mountains in 70 years. Here's where it gets terrifying. Something was hunting for this cub all night. Hit the like button if your heart is racing right now, because what happens next will blow your mind. In the back seat, the puppy made a sound. Low, almost subsonic, it vibrated through the truck cab. Not a growl, not a whine, but something that raised every hair on Tom's arms. "Martinez, I've got to go," Tom said quickly. "I'll check in later." He ended the call and glanced in the mirror again. The puppy was standing now, pressed against the front of the carrier, staring not at him but out the rear window, back toward the forest they'd left behind. Its small body was rigid, every muscle taut, and its mouth was slightly open, revealing teeth that seemed just a fraction too sharp, too long. Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Whatever this creature was, it wasn't alone. Something had been circling his cabin last night, something big, searching, and the only explanation that made sense, the only explanation that fit all the impossible pieces, was one he didn't want to accept. This wasn't an abandoned puppy. This was something that had been separated from something else. Something that was looking for it. Something that might still be tracking them even now, following the scent trail down the mountain toward the town of Cedar Falls. The truck rounded another bend, and suddenly the forest opened up to reveal the valley below. Cedar Falls spread out before them, a small town of maybe 3,000 people, smoke rising from chimneys, cars moving along Main Street, children playing in schoolyards, innocent, unaware, vulnerable. Tom's foot pressed harder on the gas pedal. Despite the dangerous road conditions, he had to get to the clinic, had to get answers, had to find out what he'd really brought down from the mountain before. A thud from behind made him jump. He glanced in the mirror, and his heart nearly stopped. If you're watching this at night, you might want to turn on the lights. What happens in the next 60 seconds is intense. The puppy had thrown itself against the carrier door. Once, twice, 3 times, with shocking force for something so small. The metal grate was beginning to bend. "Easy," Tom shouted. "Easy, just a few more minutes." But the creature wasn't listening. It slammed against the door again, and this time Tom heard a crack. Not from the carrier, from inside it. A terrible sound like breaking wood, except there was no wood in the carrier to break. The puppy was changing. Tom could see it in the mirror, though his mind screamed that what he was seeing couldn't be real. The creature's body was writhing, contorting, growing. Its bones were shifting beneath its skin, reforming, lengthening. The black fur seemed to ripple and thicken, and its eyes, God, its eyes were blazing now with an inner light that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Another impact, harder this time. The carrier door buckled. One more hit, and it would give way. Tom's cabin was miles behind them now, but the town was still 5 minutes ahead. 5 minutes with a creature that was rapidly becoming something else, something far more dangerous than a lost puppy. 5 minutes that might determine whether he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by bringing this thing off the mountain. His phone rang, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. Tom grabbed it with one hand, eyes still fixed on the bucking carrier in his mirror. "Tom, where are you?" Sarah's voice was tight with panic. 5 minutes out. "But Sarah, something's happening. It's—" "Listen to me very carefully," she interrupted, and the fear in her voice made his blood ice. "Dr. Reeves just got a call from State Wildlife. Tom, they've been tracking reports of missing wolf cubs across 3 states, illegal breeding operations, exotic animal traffickers. One of the dens was raided 2 weeks ago and several cubs escaped into the wild." Tom's throat went dry. "Sarah, they weren't regular wolves, Tom. They were hybrid experiments. Part wolf, part something else, something they were engineering for overseas buyers. And Tom, these things grow fast, exponentially fast. A 2-week-old cub can reach adult size in days under the right conditions." Another massive impact from the back seat. This time the carrier door flew open, clattering against the truck's interior. In the mirror, Tom saw the creature emerge, no longer puppy-sized, now as large as a medium dog and still growing. Its head swiveled toward him, lips pulling back to reveal fangs that were definitely not those of any domestic animal. "Tom?" Sarah's voice sounded far away. "Tom, are you there?" "I'm here," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, I think I'm in trouble." The creature that had been a puppy lunged forward and Tom swerved violently, sending the truck skidding toward the edge of the road, toward the steep drop into the valley below. Time fractured into heartbeats. The truck fishtailed on the icy road, rear wheels sliding dangerously close to the cliff's edge. Tom wrenched the steering wheel hard left, fighting against the momentum that wanted to pull them over the precipice. Behind him, the creature tumbled against the back seat with a yelp that sounded disturbingly human. The tires found traction. The truck lurched back onto solid road, engine roaring as Tom accelerated down the straightaway. His phone had fallen to the floor, Sarah's voice a tinny echo shouting his name. In the rearview mirror, the creature was climbing back to its feet, shaking its head as if dazed. But it wasn't attacking. That was the strangest part. Despite everything, despite its transformation, despite the sheer power Tom could see rippling beneath its dark fur, the creature wasn't lunging at him. It stood on the back seat, swaying with the truck's movement, staring at him with those amber eyes that held something too intelligent, too aware to be purely animal. "Easy," Tom said, his voice shaking. "I'm trying to help you. Do you understand me? I'm trying to help." The creature's ears swiveled forward, its head tilted, and for a moment, just a moment, Tom could have sworn he saw recognition flicker across its face. Then it opened its mouth, and the sound that came out made his skin crawl. It wasn't a howl. It wasn't a bark. It was something between the two, layered with overtones that shouldn't exist in nature. A call that seemed to vibrate through the truck's frame and into Tom's bones. A call that was being answered. From somewhere in the forest behind them, another howl rose, then another. Then a chorus of them, echoing down the mountainside like a terrible symphony. "Oh God," Tom breathed. The pack. The creature's family, or whatever served as family for these hybrid nightmares, they were following, and they were getting closer. He floored the accelerator. The truck careened around another bend, and suddenly Cedar Falls appeared directly ahead, the town's welcome sign flashing past. Tom had never been so relieved to see civilization. Main Street stretched before him, lined with familiar storefronts, the early morning crowd of locals grabbing coffee and heading to work. The Cedar Falls Veterinary Clinic sat at the far end of town, a converted farmhouse with a gravel parking lot. Tom could see Sarah standing outside, arms wrapped around herself against the cold, Dr. Reeves beside her in his white coat. They'd been watching for him. Tom pulled into the lot with a spray of gravel, slammed the truck into park, and practically fell out of the driver's seat. "Sarah, we need to—" "Where is it?" Dr. Reeves interrupted, moving toward the truck with cautious steps. He was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and steady hands that had stitched up countless injured animals. But those hands were trembling now as he approached the vehicle. "Back seat," Tom managed. "But it's not what I found. It's changed. It's growing. And there are more of them in the forest, and they're—" Dr. Reeves held up a hand, his face grave. He peered through the truck's rear window, and Tom watched the color drain from the veterinarian's weathered face. "Dear God," Reeves whispered. "It's further along than I feared." "Further along?" Tom demanded. "What does that mean?" Sarah grabbed his arm. "Tom, these hybrids, they were engineered to reach maturity in weeks instead of months. Something about accelerated growth hormones mixed with wolf genetics. The traffickers wanted to sell them as guard animals to overseas buyers, fully grown attack dogs that could be shipped as puppies and reach fighting size in days." "That's insane," Tom breathed. "That's illegal, dangerous, and extremely profitable." Dr. Reeves finished grimly. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling state wildlife. We need containment protocols, and we need them now. That creature is only going to get bigger, and if there's a pack following it—" He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the cold morning air. Inside the truck, the creature pressed its face against the window, breath fogging the glass. It was watching them with unsettling focus, particularly fixated on Dr. Reeves. A low rumble emerged from its chest, not quite a growl, more like a warning. "It's scared," Tom said suddenly. The realization hit him with unexpected force. "Look at it. It's not being aggressive. It's terrified." Sarah looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Tom, that thing nearly killed you on the drive down." "No." Tom shook his head. "It could have. Easily. But it didn't. When the truck skidded, it fell. It got hurt. A predator in attack mode wouldn't have made that mistake." He moved toward the vehicle, ignoring Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "Tom, don't," Dr. Reeves started. But Tom was already opening the rear door, slowly, carefully, one hand extended in a gesture of peace. The creature backed away, pressing itself against the far door, body tense but not coiled to spring. Up close, Tom could see the rapid rise and fall of its chest, the slight tremor in its legs. This wasn't a monster. This was a terrified baby, trapped in a body that was changing too fast, surrounded by strangers in an alien environment. "Hey," Tom said softly, "remember me? I'm the one who found you. I carried you through the snow. I kept you warm." He kept his voice low, steady, the same tone he'd use with any frightened animal. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's ears flattened against its skull, its lips pulled back, exposing those wicked fangs. But the growl that accompanied the display was half-hearted, uncertain. Tom could see the internal war playing out, instinct battling against memory, animal nature struggling with something more complex. "That's it," Tom murmured. "You know me, don't you? You remember." From the forest behind the clinic, another howl erupted, much closer now. The creature in the truck flinched, its head whipping toward the sound. Then it did something that made Tom's heart clench. It looked back at him, and in those amber eyes he saw something that shouldn't be possible in an animal engineered for violence. He saw a plea for help. "Dr. Reeves," Tom called over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off the creature. "How long do we have before it's fully grown?" Based on the reports, Reeves' voice was tight. "Hours, maybe less. And when the transformation completes, the growth hormones trigger aggressive, territorial instincts. It won't be able to help itself, Tom. It'll become exactly what it was engineered to be." "Then we don't have time for containment protocols," Tom said. "We have to help it now." "Help it?" Sarah's voice rose. "Tom, you can't domesticate something like this. It's not a dog. It's not even fully a wolf. It's a genetic experiment that was never meant to exist." "Which means it didn't ask to be born," Tom shot back. "It didn't choose this. Someone made it this way, and then they threw it away like trash, just like they've thrown away God knows how many others." Another howl, so close now that windows rattled. Across the street, people stopped and stared toward the forest. A mother pulled her child closer. Someone pointed at the tree line, where shadows moved between the pines. Dr. Reeves swore under his breath. "They're coming into town. The pack is following the cub's scent." He grabbed his phone again. "I'm calling Sheriff Morrison. We need to evacuate this block, maybe more. This is the moment that separates animal lovers from everyone else. Keep watching. You won't believe what happens." "Wait," Tom said, an idea forming. "The pack is following the cub, which means if we move it, we lead them away from town." "Move it where?" Sarah demanded. "Tom, there's nowhere safe to—" "The old ranger station," Tom interrupted. 20 miles north, abandoned for years. It's reinforced concrete, built to withstand fires. If we can get the cub there, contain it, maybe we can tranquilize it before the transformation completes. And when the pack follows, they'll be miles from town." Dr. Reeves stared at him. That's the most reckless plan I've ever heard. You have a better one. Silence. In the distance, sirens began to wail as someone called the police. The shadows in the forest grew more numerous, more distinct. Tom could make out shapes now, large canine forms circling the town's perimeter, drawn by something primal and irresistible, the scent of their lost kin. "I'll go with you," Dr. Reeves said finally. "Sarah, stay here and coordinate with the sheriff. Tell him what we're doing. If we're not back in 2 hours—" He didn't finish the sentence. Tom climbed into the driver's seat. The creature settled in the back, still wary but no longer fighting. As Dr. Reeves slid into the passenger seat with a case full of tranquilizer guns and sedatives, Tom caught his eye. "Thank you," Tom said quietly. Reeves nodded grimly. "Thank me when we're not dead. Now drive." The truck roared to life. Tom pulled out of the parking lot, tires spitting gravel, and aimed for the northern road out of town. In the rearview mirror, he watched Cedar Falls recede behind them, watched the shadows emerge from the forest and flow across Main Street like a dark tide, following their scent. Beside him, Dr. Reeves loaded a tranquilizer dart with shaking hands. "For what it's worth, Sullivan, you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the biggest fool." Tom glanced at the creature in the back seat, its amber eyes meeting his in the mirror. "Haven't decided which yet." The truck accelerated, racing toward the old ranger station with a growing pack of hybrid wolves in pursuit, and time running out faster than any of them could count. The old ranger station materialized through the pines like a ghost from another era. Built in the 1960s when forest fires ravaged these mountains every summer, it stood defiant against time, a squat concrete bunker with narrow windows and a steel door that had rusted but held. Tom hadn't been here in years, not since the Forest Service built newer facilities closer to town. But he remembered the layout, remembered the holding pens they'd used for injured wildlife, remembered the reinforced walls designed to withstand nature's worst fury. He just hoped they could withstand what was coming. Tom skidded to a stop in the overgrown clearing, killed the engine, and turned to face the creature in the back seat. It had grown again during the 20-minute drive, now the size of a full-grown German shepherd, its shoulders broad and muscular, its paws massive. But it sat quietly, watching him with those impossible eyes that seemed to hold more understanding than any animal should possess. "Dr. Reeves," Tom said quietly, "how much time?" The veterinarian checked his watch, his face pale. "If the pattern holds from the other reported cases, maybe an hour before full maturity. When that happens—" He trailed off, but they both knew what came next. The aggressive instincts would kick in. The creature would stop being a frightened cub and become exactly what it had been engineered to be: a weapon. "Then we've got 1 hour to figure out if there's anything of that puppy left inside," Tom said. He opened his door slowly, every movement deliberate and calm. "Come on, boy. Let's get you somewhere safe." To his amazement, the creature followed. It leapt from the truck with fluid grace, landing silently on the pine needle-covered ground. For a moment, it stood there, nostrils flaring as it scented the mountain air, ears swiveling to catch sounds Tom couldn't hear. Then it looked up at him and made a sound, soft and questioning, that was heartbreakingly similar to the weak chirp he'd heard in the snow just last night. Was it really only last night? It felt like a lifetime ago. Tom led the way to the station's side entrance, where the old wildlife pens still stood. Chain link and steel pole construction, each enclosure about 10 feet square, designed to hold bears if necessary. He opened the gate of the largest pen, and the creature walked inside without hesitation, almost like it understood this was for its own protection. Smart, Dr. Reeves murmured, watching from a safe distance, tranquilizer gun ready. Too smart. Tom, I've seen a lot of animals in my career, but the way it responds to you, that's not normal pack bonding. That's something else. Tom secured the gate and knelt just outside the chain link, bringing himself to eye level with the creature. "Hey," he said softly, "I know you're scared. I know nothing makes sense right now, but I need you to trust me a little longer, okay? Just a little longer." The creature pressed its muzzle against the fence, and Tom reached through to scratch behind its ears. The fur was coarse and thick, nothing like a domestic dog's, but the gesture was received the same way. The creature's eyes drifted half-closed, and that rumbling purr-like sound emerged from its chest. Behind them, the forest exploded with sound. Howls erupted from every direction, a cacophony that sent birds scattering from the trees in panicked clouds. Tom spun to see them emerging from the tree line, not the handful he'd expected, but dozens. Huge forms, each one fully grown, each one a nightmare of muscle and fang, their eyes glowing in the dappled shadows. The pack had caught up. Dr. Reeves raised the tranquilizer gun with shaking hands. "Tom, get inside, now." But Tom couldn't move. He was transfixed by what he was seeing. The pack wasn't attacking. They were surrounding the station, yes, forming a loose circle that grew tighter with each passing second. But they weren't charging. They were watching, waiting. The creature in the pen let out a sound, not a howl, not a bark, something else entirely. A call that carried layers of meaning Tom couldn't interpret. Several of the pack members responded, their own calls mixing with the first, creating a strange harmony that raised goosebumps on his arms. "They're communicating," Tom breathed. "Dr. Reeves, they're actually communicating with it." "That's not possible," the veterinarian said, but his voice lacked conviction. They were both watching the impossible unfold before them. The largest of the pack, a massive, black-furred beast with silver streaks identical to the cub's markings, separated from the others and moved forward with deliberate slowness. Tom's heart hammered as it approached, every instinct screaming at him to run. This was the alpha, had to be. And if the resemblance meant what he thought it meant, "That's the mother," Tom whispered. The huge wolf hybrid stopped 10 feet from the pen, its amber eyes fixed on the cub inside. The cub pressed against the chain link, whining, and the sound was pure longing, pure recognition. This was what had been circling Tom's cabin last night. This was what had been tracking them down the mountain. Not hunting, searching. A mother looking for her lost child. Tom found himself moving without thinking, stepping between the alpha and the pen. "Doctor." Reeves hissed a warning, but Tom ignored it. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, in a universal gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt it," Tom said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I found your baby in the snow. It was dying. I saved it. Do you understand? I saved it." The alpha's lips pulled back, revealing fangs that could tear through flesh like paper. A growl rumbled from deep in its chest, vibrating through the ground beneath Tom's feet. Every rational part of his brain screamed that he was about to die, but he stood his ground. "I know what you are," Tom continued, keeping his voice calm. "I know what they made you into, but I also know what you're trying to protect, and I swear to you, I will not let anyone hurt your cub, not the traffickers who created you, not the authorities who want to destroy you, no one." For a long moment, nothing moved. The forest held its breath. The pack watched in silence. Tom locked eyes with the alpha, and in those amber depths he saw intelligence that made his throat tight. This wasn't just an animal. This was a mother fighting for her child with everything she had, against a world that saw her as nothing but a mistake to be corrected. Slowly, impossibly, the alpha's growl faded. Its lips covered those terrible fangs, and it lowered its massive head in what could only be described as a nod. Tom nearly collapsed with relief. Behind him, Dr. Reeves let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. "What now?" the veterinarian asked quietly. Tom turned to look at the cub in the pen, then back at the alpha, then at the dozens of hybrid wolves watching from the tree line. An idea was forming, reckless and probably impossible, but it was the only one that made sense. "Now," Tom said slowly, "we give them a choice." Over the next hour, Tom made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Sarah, asking her to contact every wildlife sanctuary and exotic animal rescue within a 5-state radius. The second was to the State Wildlife Department, specifically to Director Patricia Chen, a woman Tom had worked with for years and who trusted his judgment even when it seemed insane. The third call was the hardest. He dialed the number Dr. Reeves had for the task force investigating the hybrid trafficking ring. "Agent Morrison," a clipped voice answered. "My name is Tom Sullivan. I'm a forest ranger in Cedar Falls. I have information about the missing wolf hybrids." There was a pause. "Go on." "I found one of the cubs, but I also found something else. These creatures, they're not just animals. They're intelligent. They communicate. They have family structures. And I think I can help you take down the people who created them, but only if you agree to my terms." "And what terms would those be, Mr. Sullivan?" Tom looked at the alpha, still watching him with those knowing eyes. "Sanctuary, not destruction. These hybrids didn't ask to be created, but they're here now, and they're trying to survive. I want guarantees that any hybrid we recover goes to a protected facility, not a kill order." Another pause, longer this time. "That's not how this works." "Then make it how it works," Tom said, steel entering his voice. "Because I have 20-plus hybrids here right now, including what I believe is a breeding female and her offspring. You can work with me and save them, or you can come in guns blazing and watch them scatter back into the wilderness where you'll never find them again. Your choice." He could hear muffled conversation on the other end, heated debate. Finally, Agent Morrison came back on the line. "You have 48 hours to prove these things can be safely contained. After that, I can't hold off the kill teams. And Sullivan, you're putting your career and possibly your life on the line for this." "I know," Tom said, "but it's the right thing to do." He ended the call and turned to find Dr. Reeves staring at him with something like awe. "You just committed professional suicide," the veterinarian said. "Probably," Tom agreed. "But I didn't become a ranger to follow bad orders. I became a ranger to protect wild things, and these might be the wildest things I've ever encountered." Over the next 2 days, Cedar Falls transformed. Wildlife experts arrived from across the country. Sanctuary representatives came with reinforced transport vehicles. The old ranger station became a temporary command center, with the pack of hybrids maintaining a cautious perimeter, while humans worked frantically to build a solution. The cub completed its transformation, reaching full size by the second evening. Tom watched it happen from outside the pen, watched the final changes ripple through its body as the accelerated growth hormones finished their work. When it was over, the creature stood as tall as the alpha, magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. But when it looked at Tom, recognition still flickered in those amber eyes, and when he opened the pen gate, heart in his throat, The hybrid walked out calmly and pressed its massive head against his chest in a gesture that needed no translation. "You remember," Tom whispered, his eyes stinging. "You still remember." The hybrid's rumbling purr was his answer. By the end of the 48 hours, a solution had been found. A private sanctuary in Montana, funded by wealthy donors who specialized in exotic animal rescue, agreed to take the entire pack. 500 acres of protected wilderness, reinforced boundaries to keep them in and threats out, and a team of specialists who understood that these creatures needed space to be what they were, not what they'd been engineered to be. The trafficking ring was dismantled. Based on information from the hybrid's location and behavior patterns, agents tracked the operation back to a compound in Nevada where 12 more cubs were recovered, along with evidence that led to arrests across 3 countries. Tom stood in the clearing as the transport vehicles loaded the pack one by one. The hybrids went peacefully, trusting in some way that this was right. The Alpha was last, pausing before entering her vehicle to look back at Tom one final time. "Take care of them," Tom said quietly. "They've been through enough." The Alpha's gaze held his for a long moment. Then she turned and walked into the transport, and the doors closed behind her. Sarah found him there an hour later, still staring at the empty clearing. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Tom admitted. "I saved one lost puppy, or thought I did, and it turned into all of this." "You did more than save a puppy," Sarah said. "You saved an entire species, even if it's a species that shouldn't exist. That takes a special kind of courage, Tom, or a special kind of crazy." He laughed weakly. "Haven't decided which yet." 3 months later, Tom received a package from the Montana sanctuary. Inside was a photo of the pack in their new home, running through snow-covered meadows, hunting together, living as something close to wild and free. And in the center of the image, the cub that he'd found on that frozen night, now fully grown and powerful, staring directly at the camera with eyes that held intelligence and something else. Gratitude. The note attached was short. "Thought you'd want to see this. The pack is thriving. The cub is a natural leader, already taking on responsibilities within the group structure. You were right about them, Tom. They're not just animals. There's something more, something worth protecting. Thank you for giving them a chance. Director Patricia Chen." Tom pinned the photo to his cabin wall, right next to his ranger badge. Every morning when he woke up, he looked at it and remembered that night in the snow, remembered the choice he'd made to stop and help something small and lost, remembered the impossible journey that followed. He'd learned something profound through it all. The world was stranger than anyone imagined, full of creatures that existed in the spaces between what was natural and what was made, what was wild and what was tame. And sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was recognize that strange didn't mean wrong, and different didn't mean dangerous. Sometimes the bravest thing was to offer trust when fear said to run, to offer protection when logic said to destroy, to offer hope when the world said something was beyond saving. This rescue changed everything, not just for one cub, but for an entire species that shouldn't exist. If stories like this inspire you, hit subscribe so you never miss another tale of courage, loyalty, and impossible bonds. And tell us in the comments, what's the most unexpected animal encounter you've ever had? That evening, as Tom made his rounds through the forest, checking trails and monitoring wildlife, he paused at the spot where he'd found the cub. The snow had long since melted, replaced by spring wildflowers that painted the forest floor in purple and gold. He knelt and touched the ground, remembering. From somewhere deep in the Montana wilderness, though he couldn't possibly hear it, a howl rose into the evening sky. Not a cry of pain or loneliness, but a song of joy, of family, of survival against impossible odds. And Tom Sullivan, forest ranger and guardian of wild things, smiled. Because sometimes the most unexpected rescues led to the most extraordinary revelations. Sometimes a single act of compassion rippled outward in ways no one could predict. And sometimes, just sometimes, the thing you thought you were saving ended up saving you right back. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Because stories like this remind us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear fur and fangs. Sometimes they're created by humanity's worst impulses, but saved by its best. And sometimes they teach us that every life, no matter how strange or unexpected, deserves a chance to be wild, to be free, to be exactly what it was meant to be. Stay tuned for more stories that prove one thing. Courage comes in all forms, love transcends all boundaries, and the bond between humans and animals can overcome even the most impossible circumstances.